The metallic tang of the certified mail envelope, a scent I now associate with betrayal, pricked at my senses before I even saw the contents. Not a bill, not junk, but heavy cream stock bearing the county clerk's embossed seal. Official, dangerous. My hands didn't tremble from fear, but a cold, creeping certainty that something sacred was about to be violated. It was. The document, a hastily filed caveat from my brother-in-law, Marcus, was a brazen attempt to block the sale of the lake house. This was the property my late husband and I had poured our life savings and dreams into, meant to fund my new beginning. For years, that little cottage had been a silent promise, a tranquil retreat from past losses. But now, Marcus's action felt like an axe blow, shattering the peace with a deafening ring of audacious greed. He had no legal claim, no true emotional tie, yet he stood to gain immensely if he could force a discount sale or buy it himself at a fraction of its value. His motive wasn't justice, it was a calculated seizure, a jarring noise interrupting the quiet sanctuary I had meticulously built. The papers laid bare his intent, a silent declaration of war. The silence after their announcement wasn't the peace I'd crave. It was the deafening quiet of a tree hitting the forest floor. I felt utterly felled, yet beneath that initial shock, something resilient began to stir. For weeks, the world muted, my landscape consumed by a stunned clarity. Clinically, assets were frozen, reputation tarnished, future vaporized. My first desperate call went to a junior lawyer. His sympathetic voice delivered a cold shower, complicated, protracted, high cost, low certainty. He confirmed conventional avenues were dead ends, no immediate path. This wasn't my way forward. Yet, as wind whipped at my exposed state, an undeniable tremor rose from below. My long-ignored roots weren't severed. They still held firm, drawing strength from unseen depths. To stand again, taller, required more than rebuilding. It demanded a new strategy, not reaction, but unyielding, deliberate growth. The quiet that now settled over everything was a strange counterpoint to the years of subtle friction, the insidious grind that had always characterized my relationship with David. He wasn't overtly cruel, not in the way that makes headlines, but his ambition was a relentless current, eroding my boundaries and resources one barely perceptible grain at a time. While I meticulously built my design business brick by painstaking brick, client by trusting client, he operated on a different scale, leveraging superficial connections and quick-win schemes. He'd boast of expansion, yet his growth was a flimsy facade, built on borrowed credit and the quiet draining of our shared accounts. My steady investments, my carefully nurtured relationships, these were his silent quarries. He genuinely believed his grand vision justified everything, seeing my prudence as an obstacle, never a strength. This slow, steady wearing away of trust, of financial stability, eventually carved out the chasm that led to the final, unforgivable breach. The true work began in the quiet hum of my home office, far from the public declarations and grandstanding. While they were busy broadcasting their distorted narrative to anyone who would listen, I was cultivating my own forest, seed by careful seed. My desk became a landscape of carefully organized folders, certified mail receipts for every unanswered query, printouts of time-stamped digital communications detailing every ignored request and shifting deadline, and meticulously sourced property deeds that revealed a very different ownership history than the one they presented. Each document was a root anchoring my case. It was a slow, expensive process, stretching over 5 months. Lawyers' fees accumulated, and document acquisition alone cost thousands. But the most significant investment, and the ultimate pattern interrupt, came from the discreet inquiry I initiated with a private investigator. The reports that landed, encrypted, in my inbox revealed more than just discrepancies. They exposed a history of similar dealings, a calculated pattern of asset concealment and misdirection that went far beyond mere negligence, demonstrating a deliberate intent to mislead. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a well-practiced playbook. Knowing this didn't just strengthen my hand, it changed the entire game. My quiet diligence had yielded a landscape of undeniable truth. The meeting started precisely as I'd anticipated. He walked in, a practiced smirk on his lips, expecting a desperate plea, perhaps even tears. He believed I was there to beg, to emotionally reclaim what he'd so carelessly appropriated. His dismissiveness hung in the air, a thick, cloying arrogance I'd known for years, but I hadn't come for an emotional appeal. Instead, I calmly placed a slim, cream-colored envelope onto the polished conference table, sliding it across the dark wood with quiet precision. No theatrics, just a simple, deliberate act. His eyes, momentarily curious, flicked to the embossed sender, Mason and Thorne LLP. The smirk, once confident, faltered. Inside, the formal notice detailed preliminary findings, specific discrepancies in Q, 3 financial reports, the unauthorized transfer of funds from the joint business account on October 17th, and the quiet sale of the lakeside property, its deed recorded under a shell company. Each assertion was backed by a time-stamped email, a bank statement, or a notary's seal. His face, usually a mask of control, began to drain. It was as if a sudden shaft of sunlight had cut through a dense, shadowy forest, illuminating what he'd kept hidden. The air, thick with his assumed dominance, thinned, making visible the strategic forest I'd cultivated, piece by quiet piece. He'd focused on individual transactions, individual trees, failing to see the entire, enveloping canopy that had grown steadily and silently above his head. He'd prepared for a shouting match, but instead was met with the crisp, professional silence of undeniable legal truth. His bluster was useless against signatures. The papers were clear. The shadows, once his ally, were now his adversary, and they had just begun to stretch long. The calm before the storm was exceptionally short-lived. As the weight of my actions began to sink in, his carefully constructed facade of control cracked, replaced by a desperate scramble. My phone, once quiet, started buzzing with calls from numbers I hadn't seen in months, displaying names now relegated to blocked contact 3. Each voicemail was a torrent of frantic accusations, fraud, defamation, malicious intent interspersed with increasingly desperate demands to reconsider. I listened to them all, transcribed the key threats, and archived the audio files, feeling the familiar hum of the ocean deep within me. Then came the emails, a flurry of legal-sounding jargon threatening immediate and severe repercussions, yet notably lacking any actual filing numbers or court seals. He even mobilized old mutual contacts, spreading thinly veiled rumors about my unstable nature or greedy motivations, attempts that simply dissolved against my quiet consistency. It was clear he was terrified, afraid of losing the empire he'd built, however unjustly. But while he flailed in a tempest of his own making, I stood unyielding. Much like a redwood weathering a gale, his baseless counter-allegations were easily dismissed. My lawyer simply forwarded concise, time-stamped records refuting each point, rendering their bluster powerless. There was no real fight here, only noise. Every frantic call, every desperate email merely served as confirmation, stealing my resolve further as I prepared for what came next. The morning I scheduled our final meeting, the air was surprisingly still, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Robert's immediate future. He arrived, expecting to deliver another lecture, another thinly veiled threat about his control over our joint ventures. He began by reiterating how he'd leveraged what he called dormant assets and streamlined ownership euphemisms for his systematic misappropriation of funds from the legacy holding company I'd inherited. He believed my focus was elsewhere, on my personal life, a convenient blind spot he had carefully cultivated over years. But he didn't realize that every streamlined transaction, every rerouted revenue stream, had been meticulously documented. My legal team had spent months quietly constructing an irrefutable case, using his own digital fingerprints as evidence. I laid out the certified statements, bank transfers, shell company registrations, and the notarized trust documents proving his unauthorized transfers. These papers, once abstract entries, now became a suffocating weight for him. His face, usually a mask of composed arrogance, fractured. He sputtered, accusing me of betrayal, but his bluster was just noise against the quiet authority of the facts. The full weight of my strategy wasn't just about reclaiming the diverted capital. It was about ensuring the future of my lineage for the ancient forests of my inheritance he'd tried to clear-cut for his own short-term gain. I presented the final document, the deed now irrevocably transferred back into a protected, diversified trust. The land, the patents, the core business all secured, no longer vulnerable to opportunistic predators. A cease and desist order for any future contact was already filed, a clean severance. My position was unassailable, while his options dwindled to zero. If you've ever felt the ground shifting beneath your feet, remember the strength you hold and say this: you tried to cut down a sapling. You forgot you were standing in the shadow of a redwood. My focus now turned to strategic growth and unburdened expansion.